I'm excited.
Not the papers themselves, but a CIA memo about them.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So for everyone listening, just a quick reminder, the Pentagon Papers were this huge top-secret study on the Vietnam War.
Massive, right? The 47 volumes.
Yeah, 47 volumes.
Right.
Exactly. The Secretary of Defense at the time.
And they were finished in 69.
But here's the thing. They didn't leak until 1971.
Wild, huh?
That's what makes this CIA memo we're looking at so interesting. It's basically a time capsule of panic.
At a total freak-out moment for the government.
Exactly. So before we get into all that, let's make sure everyone's on the same page.
Good idea. So basically, they were a super in-depth study of the Vietnam War.
Like everything about it.
Pretty much. It covered U.S. involvement from, like, the very beginning all the way up to 1968.
47 volumes. That's insane. You need a library just to store them.
Talk about trying to keep a secret.
Seriously.
There were some major players involved.
Like who?
But you also have Leslie Gelb. He was the guy who headed up the task force that actually put the whole thing together.
Interesting.
And then there's John McNaughton. He was a top official at the Department of Defense.
So this was coming straight from the top. And to think that all this info was kept under wraps for so long.
Oh, until it wasn't?
And even presidents like Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy had access to some of this stuff.
Yep. Some of the information in those pages was seen by multiple presidents.
Okay, so we've got the who, but what about the what? What kind of secrets were actually hidden in these Pentagon Papers that had the CIA freaking out?
Well, the CIA was freaking out because the Pentagon Papers weren't just some dry policy papers. They were a deep dive into the inner workings of the U.S. government.
Like what kind of stuff?
We're talking about raw intelligence reports, predictions about the enemy, even stuff about covert operations.
Seriously.
It was a PR nightmare in the making.
I'm picturing some underground bunker, like something out of a spy movie.
Huh. Well, not quite.
Not quite.
They were actually kept in a bunch of different places.
Like where?
Well, one place was the RAND Corporation.
The RAND Corporation.
Yeah, it's a think tank that does a lot of work for the government.
Oh, okay.
But get this, the memo even mentions the possibility that copies might have ended up at the Soviet embassy.
Wait, what? The Soviet embassy? That's straight out of a spy movie.
Right. It's wild.
So the CIA was worried about leaks both inside and outside the U.S.?
Absolutely. They were casting a very wide net of concern.
Okay, so we've got mountains of secret documents scattered all over the place, including maybe even enemy territory.
It was a recipe for disaster.
For sure. But let's get back to the CIA memo.
Okay.
Okay, lay them on me. Oh, right.
Exactly. Imagine trying to negotiate peace while also dealing with a massive leak that basically calls you a liar.
Yeah, not a good look.
And then there's the issue of public trust. Remember, this was a time when people were already skeptical of what the government was saying about the Vietnam War.
Yeah, for good reason.
The Pentagon Papers basically just confirmed their suspicions.
So the leak had the potential to totally undermine public trust in the government.
Big time.
Okay, and what was their third major worry?
Well, they were terrified that this was just the tip of the iceberg. Exactly. They were picturing a flood of secrets spilling out, and they thought that could really mess up national security.
Okay, so we've got mountains of secret documents, a panicked CIA, and a public that's already on edge.
It was a tense situation.
But we've talked about the who, what, and where of the Pentagon Papers.
The timing is key here.
How so?
Well, remember, the study was commissioned in 67, finished in 69, and then it just sat there for 2 years before being leaked in 71.
So the information was already kind of old news by the time it hit the public. Who cares about outdated secrets?
The CIA acknowledged that the info was outdated, but they still thought it could cause serious damage.
Why? Why would old information still be a threat?
Because even though the specific events were in the past, the information revealed a pattern of secrecy and deception by the government.
So it showed that they weren't being straight with the public, even if it wasn't about current events.
Exactly. They were worried that this leak, even with outdated info, could completely destroy what little public trust they had left.
Okay.
It was about the overall picture it painted.
So we've got a massive leak, a panicked CIA, and a public that's already pretty skeptical.
It was a powder keg waiting to explode.
So what happens next? What does the CIA memo suggest the government do about this whole mess?
Well, that's where we really get into the nitty-gritty of the CIA's analysis, and that's something we'll explore in part 2 of our deep dive.
Ooh, a cliffhanger. All right, everyone listening. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into the Pentagon Papers.
Back for more secrets.
You know it. Last time, we left off with the CIA basically freaking out over this massive leak.
And rightfully so. I mean, this had the potential to be seriously damaging.
Yeah, especially when it came to how the public viewed the Vietnam War.
Right. The war was already super controversial.
Oh, absolutely.
And these papers, they offered a behind-the-scenes look that didn't exactly line up with the official story.
So it wasn't just about keeping secrets safe.
No, the CIA was really worried about how all this would play out in the court of public opinion.
And the memo we're looking at, it really gets into that, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It shows how concerned they were about public perception and the potential for backlash.
Okay, so let's get into some specifics.
Okay.
What kind of bombshells were in these papers that could turn public opinion even further against the war?
Well, one of the biggest revelations was that the U.S. government had secretly expanded the war into Cambodia and Laos.
Secretly?
Yeah, they had publicly denied any involvement in those countries.
But the Pentagon Papers showed they were lying.
Exactly.
Wow, so the war was even bigger than people realized.
Way bigger.
And it was all happening without the public's knowledge or consent.
The anti-war movement really gained momentum after this leak came out.
I can imagine it went from protesting the war itself to protesting the government's lies about the war.
Exactly. The whole narrative about the war was flipped on its head.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential damage to the U.S.'s reputation, the loss of public trust, the CIA's fears about more leaks happening. And we talked about how the timing of the leak was especially bad because of the ongoing peace negotiations.
Right.
But there's one big question we haven't really dug into yet.
And what's that?
Why did someone leak these papers in the first place? Like a disgruntled employee or something?
Right.
That's pretty brave.
It is risking your career, maybe even your freedom, to expose secrets like that.
You said the memo explores other possibilities, though, right? What else did they consider?
Well, they also considered the possibility that the leak was politically motivated.
Like someone was trying to undermine the Nixon administration.
Exactly. Using the leak as a weapon to influence public opinion and maybe even sabotage the peace talks.
Wow, that takes this to a whole other level.
Right. It's not just about exposing the truth anymore. It's about using that truth for political gain.
So the CIA was concerned that someone might be manipulating events behind the scenes.
Absolutely. They were looking at the timing of the leak, the specific documents that were chosen, everything.
Makes sense. I mean, leaking 47 volumes, that's a lot of info to sift through.
It is, and the CIA suspected that whoever leaked these papers was very deliberate in their choices.
Like they were trying to paint a specific picture of the war and the government's involvement in it.
Exactly. They were shaping the narrative.
So where do you draw the line between whistleblowing and using leaks for political purposes?
That's a tough question, and it's one that the CIA was grappling with.
I mean, it's one thing to expose wrongdoing, but it's another to try to influence events for your own gain.
But that's not always easy to determine.
So we've got a potential whistleblower, maybe some political maneuvering going on behind the scenes, a lot of uncertainty.
The CIA had their work cut out for them.
They did, but what did they actually recommend doing about all of this?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting because the memo doesn't exactly lay out a step-by-step plan.
It doesn't.
No, but it does offer some insights into how they were thinking, and that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
All right, everyone, we're about to get into the heart of the CIA's response to this explosive leak, so stick around. Welcome back to the show, everyone, for the final part of our deep dive on the Pentagon Papers.
We're in the end game now.
We are. And last time we left off with the CIA in full scramble mode, trying to figure out how to handle this massive leak and what to do next.
Yeah, a lot of damage control going on.
Absolutely. So they've got these huge concerns about their reputation being tarnished, public trust eroding, and the very real possibility of even more leaks popping up.
Right, a whole cascade of secrets they were worried about.
Exactly. And the big question is, what did they suggest doing about all of this? Did they come up with some kind of master plan to fix everything?
Well, the memo isn't exactly a roadmap with clear instructions. It's more like a deep dive into their thought process at the time.
So more like trying to understand how they were approaching the problem.
Exactly. It's like looking over their shoulder as they try to make sense of this whole situation.
Okay, I like that. So what were some of the main things they focused on? What were their key takeaways from this whole debacle?
One thing that really jumped out is their laser focus on information security.
Makes sense. I mean, someone managed to copy and leak all 47 volumes of the Pentagon Papers.
It was a massive security breach and a huge wake-up call for them.
It makes you wonder if any information is truly safe, if something that massive can just disappear like that.
Right. If they can lose track of 47 volumes, what else could be out there?
What does it say about how they wanted to improve things?
They really hammered home the need for stricter control over who can access classified information in the first place.
Like limiting access on a need-to-know basis.
Exactly. And they also talked about implementing more robust security measures to prevent future leaks.
Beefing up security, better locks, more background checks, that kind of thing.
Oh, you're right.
What do you mean?
Well, the memo also delves into this really complex issue, balancing government secrecy with the public's right to know.
That's a tough one, because you need some level of secrecy to protect national security and keep people safe.
Right, especially when it comes to things like war. Exactly, and the Pentagon Papers really forced them to confront that dilemma head-on.
So it became this huge debate about transparency versus secrecy.
And the memo doesn't really offer any easy answers, but it does acknowledge that finding the right balance is crucial.
Did they have any suggestions for how to achieve that balance?
Well, they stressed that the government needed to be more transparent with the public without compromising national security.
Easier said than done.
But it's a goal worth striving for.
So it's a lesson learned the hard way.
Definitely a turning point in how we think about government transparency and accountability.
Okay, so we've covered the practical stuff like tightening security and figuring out who was behind the leak. But we've also touched on this deeper philosophical issue, the balance between secrecy and the public's right to know.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Absolutely. But I'm curious about the historical aspect of all of this.
Yeah.
How did this leak actually change the way we understand the Vietnam War?
It had a profound impact. The Pentagon Papers showed that the government hadn't been honest with the public about the war's origins and how it escalated. It challenged the official narrative that had been carefully constructed over years.
So it wasn't just about uncovering secrets, it was about rewriting history, or at least offering a new perspective on it.
Exactly. It filled in a lot of gaps and gave us a more complete and arguably more accurate understanding of what really happened.
So it was like a giant puzzle, and the Pentagon Papers were these missing pieces that helped us see the full picture.
And it also highlights how important it is to be critical of official narratives and to seek out primary sources whenever possible, even when they're classified.
It's like being a detective. You have to follow the evidence wherever it leads.
Exactly. And that evidence can sometimes lead to uncomfortable truths.
So, after all this, what would you say is the big takeaway? What can we learn from this whole saga all these years later?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the pursuit of truth is a never-ending journey.
It's not a destination, it's a process.
Exactly. It requires vigilance, a willingness to question authority, and a dedication to transparency.
And those are qualities we need not just when we're talking about government secrets, but in all aspects of our lives.
Absolutely. We should always strive to be critical thinkers, to question what we're told, and to be open to new information even when it challenges our existing beliefs.
Well said. I think we've really unpacked the complexities of the Pentagon Papers today.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have the who, what, when, where, why, even the philosophical implications.
It's been a fascinating look at a pivotal moment in history and one that still resonates with us today.
It really does, and it reminds us that history is full of secrets waiting to be uncovered.
And those secrets can sometimes change the way we see the world.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Pentagon Papers. And remember, keep asking questions and keep searching for the truth.